have one Mr. Matt Tomlinson here from Indeed, and he is indeed, God, that was so bad. So bad.
It's a great pun.
Like, I am so known for doing the bad puns, too, or dad jokes.
Bad pun.
Anyway, Indeed, he is going to give us one of the best presentations ever. That group of people over there clap really loud, and there's like twice as many in there. So I really want you to do your best. Oh no! Everybody, please welcome Mr. Matt Tomlinson with Indeed. Big round of applause, please. So you guys, clap.
All right, thank you. That was a little embarrassing. Okay, I do want to get a quick level set. I'm going to ask for a Boolean poll for everyone. So you're going to categorize yourself into one of two areas. You either come from a finance background or an engineering background. Some of you might come from a third background, but just from a Boolean perspective, who comes from sort of a finance background? Okay, and who comes from sort of an engineering background? Okay, so that helps me calibrate sort of what some of the examples that I'll go through. Hi, I'm Matt Tomlinson. I do product stuff at Indeed. So there's really three things I'm going to teach you. Came from the Air Force, so you always teach three things. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to tell you what I told you. So it'll be very simple. Some of you guys are going to want to take photos of these screens and slides, and I'm very humbled by you wanting to do that. You don't need to. These will be captured on YouTube, and I have been told there's some way I'll be able to give a PDF of my slides out as well. So I can't promise how, but there will be some mechanism. And worst case, you can go on YouTube and take screenshots on YouTube. But if you want to take a photo, you can. Please think about any questions that you might want to have. I have like 40 slides, but I'm going to get through them in like 20 minutes. So we'll have plenty of time for questions, hopefully, towards the end. Anyways, governance is important. T-shirt sizing works. And don't limit yourself to spend tracking, which sounds a little weird because I said you need a budget. But we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so this is ultimately the mistake I want to help you to avoid. All the numbers have been removed to protect the innocent, but that was a bad period in Indeed's history. So we don't want that sort of up and down. Like, we want a little bit more predictability. Okay, so again, getting back to the actual presentation, you don't need a budget, or you need a budget, but you don't need to use dollars. Indeed is a search engine, so searching for FinOps, where in Austin, Texas. We help people get jobs. That's ultimately our mission. Our vision internally is we're trying to help engineers get from idea to impact in 10 minutes or less, which is extremely challenging. Right now, it takes about 2 weeks to go from an idea for an improvement to our website to a change on that website. So we're trying to actually sort of crank that number down as fast as possible. FinOps is a big portion of how we're getting to that. Indeed is a giant hive of microservices. We've got thousands and thousands of systems, services on thousands and thousands of systems all talking to each other. Untangling this web is a fun challenge. Some might say nightmare. We also talk about no barriers, only guardrails. So we want to empower our teams to go as fast as possible, have them launch their idea and get into sort of into orbit. And then this is sort of our 3-year horizon. Right now, we're sort of in the launch, which is a lift and shift from on-prem private cloud into public cloud and cloud-native stuff. Ultimately, we want to get to the do awesome stuff. And in scope, schedule, cost trade-off, we have basically heavily indexed on velocity. So anything we can do, we are knowingly inefficient in how we do some things right now because it is allowing us to get into the cloud faster. Those efficiencies will come eventually, but right now it's very inefficient to be on-prem and in the cloud. So we just want to get entirely onto the prem. So we're very much in our crawl to walk stage of getting into the cloud. So this is our account growth, which has been quite crazy. So I always have a plan. So we're doing a sub-account process where everything is linked accounts. So multi-account strategy. Every system we have, which there are thousands of systems, has at least one account. Many of them have 3 or 4 accounts, depending on the environment that they run in. And so these accounts are just going off like crazy. A lot of our tooling breaks down as we try to go up to so many accounts and process these different things for these amounts of systems. So Andy Jassy here, appropriately the CEO of AWS, or Amazon now, but was AWS at the time. You just can't learn certain lessons until you get to the elbow in the curve, which that prior slide definitely illustrates for us. I'll talk through about how that curve of this slide overlaps with the spin curve in the very next slide. So here are the two overlapped. So we had that big oopsie moment before we even had the growth, right? So we really weren't controlling things very well. We weren't paying attention to things. We had a lot of challenges. So I want to talk about what we've learned. We were crawling. We started off blissfully ignorant. We were just like, hey, cloud, it's awesome, yay. And we learned a lot of things. We didn't have any visibility. We didn't have any governance. What was the worst that could happen? We had no controls in place. We're very much a 16-year-old startup. So we had a lot of growth. When we looked at it, it went down. So sort of when things are observed, good things happen. But then we had tens of thousands of engineers on thousands of services. Or not tens of thousands of engineers on tens of thousands of services. And so by June of 2020, we knew we needed some governance. So we immediately talked to a bunch of smart people and realized we needed a CBO. So check, CCOE, check. And finally, the most recent thing we're working on is what we're calling a cloud economics team, which is basically FinOps team. So I'm trying to check that box now. So we knew we needed to do something. So we started using various budgeting tools. The real challenge for us here was gross versus net. All of our engineers were thinking about public on-demand pricing versus the actual net amortized costs that we were sort of charging out to those things. Calculator out of AWS really confused the heck out of a lot of people. Obviously, it's a useful tool, but again, it's mainly public pricing. Misunderstanding of discounts. The deer in the headlights is really my engineers at Indeed know about features. So when you ask them if you need $10,000 or $15,000, they just don't know. Like, what are you talking about? Like, money? Like, that doesn't exist. Like, I get stuff for free. I just need to put my features out. So unblended, public on-demand, and net amortized, that's my three favorite things to try to compare. And then no easy way to segment, and then planning. So all these sorts of things broke down with the traditional tooling that we ran into. And so ultimately, what did we need to do to sort of correct this curve right here? So we dug into the data. This is a sort of a real histogram of our thousands of accounts. And the x-axis along the bottom is the amount of spend by $100. So basically, I won't make you read this. 76% of all of our accounts were spending less than $100 a month, which basically is like, oh, okay, I don't need to care about those. And then 85% of all of our cloud spend came from the top 3% of our accounts. So this very quickly, in one slide, is what we learned. We learned that we don't need to care about 97% of our accounts. What we figured out to run, again, sorry, I'll show this slide for you again. I think someone wanted to take a picture of it. What we ultimately learned is we can just bucketize these things, t-shirt sizing. So we figured out what we needed to do. So dollar spend planning was bad for 97% of all of our audience, and t-shirt sizing was good. This is ultimately what I thought was not that interesting, but a lot of other people who I've talked to is like, oh, that's a really fascinating way of looking at things. So once we started looking at this, we're worried about, okay, would this work? Can we keep track of it? Would finance ever trust us again if we told we were going to give a large t-shirt to somebody? Thankfully, we have some very good finance folks who partner with us. So we set up basically small, medium, large. The two only numbers that you need to take away from this entire presentation is $100 and $15,000. And again, this is just net amortized cost spend per month per linked account. Again, we're graced by the fact that we have lots of linked accounts versus a few. Obviously, a lot of companies go with a few centralized accounts. And so, as I said, 3% of the accounts are large. That's 85% of all of our spend. So we can spend all of our time on just that large one. It's super easy to use. It works really well. It's really helped get our variance down quite a bit from our forecasted spend to our actual spend. So now we'll start talking about what's the next in this sort of step. This is sort of crawl, walk, run. This is sort of run. I want to go run faster, right? We're always trying to do more. And it worked really well. It now sort of allows us to correlate the growth and spend in this last sort of half of the curve for the last 2.5 years. So that's been good. But that's not everything. So if you've read the book, this is the part of the book I highlighted the most, which is it's a really simple formula. I've been trying to say this for years, and it's funny when you finally find someone else who said the same thing that you've been saying for years. Like, oh, okay, I wasn't crazy. I just hadn't read the book yet. So I love this formula, spend equals rate, usage times rate. So I'm going to dig into this formula just a minute. These are all actual chart data. I just had to remove the numbers. So spend equals usage times rate. So here's our spend graph for one of our larger accounts. This is actually our account that runs all of our Kubernetes. So it's a shared services account. That's their spend over time. It's gone up. This is their usage over time. And you'll notice those two graphs look almost the same. So if I overlap them on top of each other, spend and usage pretty tightly correlate. But if you're really sharp-eyed and you know your calculus, this is their rate. The rate is actually going down. Let me isolate the rate for a second here. So the most challenging thing here is that rate is decreasing over time. And so of the three portions, the three variables here in this formula, the one variable that the engineering lead for this team has no idea about, actually something my FinOps team has the most to control, is the fact that the rate is decreasing over time. So when I ask the engineering team, do you need 10,000 next month or 15,000 next month? Not only do they have a deer in the headlights because they're not used to dealing with numbers, they really don't know. They literally can't tell me. Even if they were really expert tracking everything that they were doing in Calculator at AWS, they just wouldn't be able to predict what is the rate that they're going to be going by. So we've learned that the spend doesn't result in good estimates for our large accounts, which are the only ones that really matter for us. So this is the challenge. We're giving them half the information. They don't know the anticipated rate. And so we're trying to figure out, like, how do we tackle that? And so as we're getting into this, we're trying to figure out, as we get into this, we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we forecast which of these sort of scenarios should this particular team plan for? And so ultimately, we're looking at sort of usage, and we're focusing on usage. These are our categories. These are also actual percentages for us. 70% of all of our cloud spend is compute. This should probably mirror a lot of what your experiences are. 11% are storage, 8% are transfer, database, and everything else. So really what we're doing right now is we're just focusing on compute and storage. If we know transfer, some of the other things, we're doing that as well. But we're really just asking the teams, instead of how much money do you need next month, how many hours of compute do you need next month? How much storage do you need next month? And we're trying to get them to actually estimate things down. This is where I say you need a budget, but you don't need to use dollars. I'm trying to set the budget at the resource level, not at the dollar level. Because then I can do the calculations. So we're shifting from this to this. How much budget do you need? How much compute do you need? I should use my own slides. And this gets us into sort of what I'm calling our sort of FinOps nirvana, where we're going towards. We're trying to get all of the tools that we use to think about usage. So obviously we do need to calculate out the dollars. We can do that. That's fairly straightforward. We do need all the tools to use net amortized costs. It really frustrates me that I have to calculate this manually from the three columns versus Amazon just providing it for us. Separating out budget estimation versus usage for rate. This is an important one for us. And then finally, on part two, we're trying to get the better sub-attribution of services. Labels aren't perfect, especially for shared services. There are some very good vendors and now open source software out there that does this for Kubernetes. But there are other things as well that we need to sort of blend those things together and really try to have the show back. And then the other vexing challenge for us is in that early slide with the microservices, the mesh of all the microservices, is really understanding, I know how much the Indeed.com homepage costs. So I know their AWS linked account. I know their Kubernetes costs. I cannot tell you right now how much the Indeed.com webpage costs because it has 20 different dependent services. And I don't yet know the recursive level of costs of all those dependent services and sort of how to roll those things up. Like, that is really sort of another interesting challenge. So I need alerts and anomalies by both usage and rate. Like right now, all the tools out there for anomalies are just based off of spend, and that could be a rate challenge versus a usage challenge. It's oftentimes a usage challenge, but sometimes there's a rate issue that I have to do. And then finally, I'm trying to move all of my large accounts, those top 3%, into unit economics. And so just yesterday, I was talking with a team based in Tokyo. They're doing machine learning modeling creation. It's very compute intensive. They're using Spot instances, which seems like an ideal use case for Spot. The challenge is Spot instances sometimes get revoked and pulled back. And so their models are failing because they're not completing, and they're not able to resume those models as easy as normal batch jobs would be. And so they actually want to just go to on-demand, which is going to be higher price. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, what's the unit economics for them of, is it the number of successfully trained models, or is it the hours per training in model, or what, that we can show, okay, we're going to drive that down by spending more for on-demand instances versus on spot instances. Can we show that there's greater value back to the business? So we haven't figured it all out. We're certainly early in our stage, but these are the takeaways. I told you I'd tell you 3 things. Hopefully I told you those 3 things, and these are those 3 things as I told you. So set up a governance structure, CBO, CCOE, and some type of FinOps team. T-shirt sizing works surprisingly well. So if you have a multi-account strategy, it's very easy. Just focus on your top, and that's going to solve a lot of your problems. And don't limit yourself to spend tracking. There's a lot you can do with rate and usage tracking, especially on the usage side, to make things easier for you as you go. Obligatory slide, we are hiring, as I think everyone here is. So here is what's called a Go link. So this is a link that's public to the world that will open up any FinOps jobs that are at Indeed at any given point in time. So feel free to visit that or talk to me afterwards. And with that, we will transition into the Q&A. How did I do on time?
You just flew.
Oh,
you
great.
have 15 minutes still.
15 minutes.
That means that's great, because we have
Okay.
a lot for Q&A, and I know I've got so many hands popping up here. I'm also want to put up, Ashley told me that at the end of every slideshow, there was a great way to meet up with folks later. This literally is probably the only deck that doesn't have it. Where are you going to be on day 2?
I will be in practitioner training tomorrow.
That would
so
be...
if you want to meet up with me, please see me after this during the break or in the evening.
I'm so glad to hear that, too. Yay. So we do have some questions. And who rose the... Where we go? We got here. You're going to go first there.
So as you ask your customers for usage, how does elasticity goals for the company or auto-scaling add complexity in that regard?
So the big assumption there is that we're assuming the customer has a vague understanding of what their own growth should be. We usually add an organic 10% growth on top of that, just because we know that there's going to be we see, even for teams that say they're going to be sort of static, we see sort of an organic 10% annualized, so it's 0.08% per month, monthly sort of growth. And we sort of build that in as well. Yep.
So first off, thank you for calling out the usage thing, because I'm actually dealing with a situation like that right now where we have a rate change that we're Microsoft and we set our own rates, right, for our own usage. And we have a rate change that happens like at the end of the fiscal year. And of course, all my tracking is messed up.
Right.
So word to the wise. How do you, so the challenge, of course, is that rate, spend is a common denominator across all resource types, right? So it's very easy to aggregate. And you said, well, okay, well, look, we're focusing on compute and storage. I guess you're showing like core hours, virtual machine hours, or something along those lines, and gigabyte months or something. What do you think about when you're looking at the higher level or different PaaS services? So web apps and Redis and even Kubernetes, like in terms of like how far down the stack do you go before you've got like a million different metrics you're tracking?
I mean, this is a Pareto problem, 80-20, right? So we're trying to cover 80% of the costs, and the 20% is overhead. Though we will be working our way down that stack sort of as we mature our own sort of internal tooling and way of looking at. All the data is actually there.
Yeah.
We process the cur into an internal search engine. We're a search company, so we use search engines internally. So we process the cur into an internal search engine that people can then index into. And so we have daily information to the cur, and we have queries that are on that index that we can give out to people. So if they wanted to see down to what they're spending, if they're spending 23 cents on IOPS. They could see that, and they could estimate that they had 2 million IOPS last month, and they need 2.5 million IOPS next month, which is 23 cents to 28 cents. If they wanted to estimate that out, that's fine. I mean, tracking 5 cents of variance there isn't really useful for me at this point yet, because I'll round that up after hundreds of thousands and several millions of dollars sort of all tally. But it's all a balance of like what level of granularity you want. So we're starting at the highest level, just the most useful stuff from an 80-20 perspective.
Is that by team or?
It's by account. And so There are 3,000 people who commit code at Indeed. I think that's a public number. 400 teams, but we have several thousand accounts, and so it's a many-to-many sort of relationship where some teams have multiple accounts, so we're trying to do it at the account level. There's nothing governing. Some teams combine things together into amalgamated accounts. And so there's nothing stopping a team from doing that other than it makes their own work harder when I ask them if that account is amalgamated as small or medium, I don't care. If that amalgamated account with like 3 different systems on it becomes a large, I all of a sudden start asking that team more questions. So there's actually an incentive for them to decompose that large account into multiple mediums if they have 3 things running under one account, because it'll make it easier on them to then estimate, okay, what am I doing? What do I need for this particular system? So I'm doing it at the account level.
All right, right better in the back. I've decided when I tell people to clap early, it just makes you guys speak a lot faster. So I'm going to have to stop doing that. So here you go.
I speak fast anyway, so yeah.
The question I have is about, you said you ask your teams for the budget, right? Like how often do you track like the budget versus the actuals?
Yeah, that's great. So I track them daily, but no, the official cadence is monthly. So every month we're looking at sort of actual spend, actual forecast versus spend. We go back to sort of the senior finance leadership about quarterly with a sort of a model, sort of forecasting out the next 6 months worth of spend, just so they can sort of set the board's expectations on what that's going to go into the COGS and all that stuff. But no, the teams are really thinking about it monthly, but they have access to daily data on their own, and then I'm actually sort of looking at it daily as well.
All right, any more? Oh, right over here. Oh, you'll be first, second. Someone over here was third. Gotcha.
Hopefully a quick question. Can you go a little deeper into your operating model for the governance team, the 3 functions that you spoke about?
Oh, gladly, yes. So the Cloud Business Office is a virtual team, a cross-functional team made up of directors amongst the company. We try to make sure we hit every discipline to make sure that we're able to set really good policies and for lack of a better word, governance around sort of how should we use the cloud. Governance is not something that Indeed is very good at. We're really a 16-year-old startup that doesn't like to have rules put on us. But it really was like we're defining things like, what does cloud native mean? What do we consider cloud native to be at Indeed? Can you use any service from the public cloud at Indeed? The answer is no. What kind of security do you need to have in place if you're going to set up a new service on Indeed? So that's where the CBO is coming in. And the cloud economics team, FinOps, is really sort of based as an actual staffed arm of the CBO. And so the teams who want to have a large level of budget or already have a large level of budget have to interact with the CBO and my cloud economics team to sort of help make sure that those budgets are sort of aligned. The CCOE is sort of our Cloud Center of Excellence is meant to be our internal consultants to really sort of enable the teams and answer their questions, help them get set up, do any automated tooling, or create automated tooling that doesn't already exist so teams can do self-service. Does that help? Yep. Great.
I almost didn't turn this on. Here you go.
First of all, thank you. That was a great presentation. What's the recommended tooling for forecasting purposes? Have you figured out especially for driver-based forecasting? Because it appears that you have, every month there's a new initiative that you have to kind of figure out whether it's going to impact or not. So what's the right tooling that you are using to enable you?
I haven't found it yet. I've used a lot, and none of them are perfect, including a very large spreadsheet. I broke Google Sheets used to have a 5,000 cell limit, and I broke it. And now they bumped it to 5 million cell limit, and now they bumped it to 10 million cells. And I'm about to break that. So don't use Google Sheets. It doesn't scale. Not that Google is a perfectly good product. I use it for a lot of other things. It's just for what I was trying to do. It's not a database. All the other tools I've used are really budget-based and spend-based. And so we've had to come up with some internal tooling on the usage side of things. But there's no right answer. It's very challenging. And it really depends on sort of how does your finance team want to consume the information and how can you show them sort of your confidence interval of what your forecasts are, and things like that. So I don't have a good answer for you there. I'm sorry, other than just try, keep iterating.
All right over here. I think I'll just take a seat while you ask that question. Here you go. Yes.
Thank you. So the tooling was my first question. How granular do you get in capturing your usage categories? And then kind of as a follow-up, I assume you're indexing all the other costs. So you mentioned you were focused on compute and storage.
Yeah.
But you have everything else. So I assume you apply a pricing, beta or something along those lines to gross it up to full cost. Is that what you're doing?
That's a great question. We don't yet. It's something we've considered. So our granularity is the granularity of the cur. So we process 25 million rows a month of cur data. It's not a small cur, right? So and whatever level, and we bring in almost every column that Amazon provides, and so we can roll up some things. So we know that there's S3 is like categorized like 4 different ways, right? So we can roll up all that as storage. EC2 obviously has like a dozen different ways that it sort of is classified in the cur. So we have some queries that sort of bring those in together. And so we start at a very high level, sort of big rock perspective. But if you want to get down into sort of small rocks, you can get to any level of granularity you want. In terms of cost, we use net amortized, so it's the best way to sort of show. We do all CSPs and RI buys at the main payer account level, right? So to amortize those down to the linked account levels, you have to use net amortized. And I did have a slide, but I pulled it out because it seemed esoteric. But the net amortized is really just it's the net actual minus the upfront minus the reserve instance discount. Plus one other thing, which I'm forgetting because I'm trying to do it from memory. And so the net amortized really sort of says, okay, what should be attributed out? But as I said earlier with the homepage example, like I know the cost of the linked account for the homepage, which is surprisingly small, and I know the cost of the homepage Kubernetes resources, which is much larger. And so I can add those two things together in 2 different indices right now. In our roadmap of sort of maturity within the company, we're going to have a meta-level index, which will sort of summarize things together. And the target audience for that will be sort of engineering managers and directors who need to say, what does I'm the manager for the homepage, what does the homepage cost? And then it will then bring all that up into sort of one level higher. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, folks? We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions here. Am I missing anyone?
I got one in
No, they
corner.
didn't. We do have a question over here. Okay, good. See, we have so many questions with these great speakers that we could just keep going.
Hey, yeah, thank you very much. I was curious about like just introducing to like engineering teams like what their like this usage-based forecasting is, right? Because a lot of people, they'll know, well, I have the code for all of XYZ components, but they don't even really know what servers, what resources they run on, right? They write the code. We have a team that builds the infrastructure. So there's like a disconnect there. Like, how would you recommend like introducing that, bridging the gap, stuff like that?
As much data transparency as you can give them. So engineers pretty uniformly love data, right? Especially when it's data that correlates to something that they're doing that they're passionate about. So I have 5 years worth of cur data in my index, and so I can literally, for however long their account has been in existence, I can show them a historical graph of their number of EC2 hours or their number of EC2 instances over however long that their linked account has existed. And they know on different spikes in that graph when they've done different releases or when they've scaled or when they moved into Europe or into Asia Pacific or they did different regions. And they can sort of do their own correlation of, okay, this is when this happened, this is when this happened. And then they usually get really excited about it. And they actually get more excited about the usage amounts because it's very tacit to them than the dollar amounts. Because again, they have no idea. It's like trying to track a stock price. Like you have no idea how much we're going to pay for any given EC2 instance in a family at any given point in time because like I literally have 100 active CSPs, right? And so who knows which CSP is going to apply to your particular hour of instance in that particular region for that particular instance type. Like it's such a challenge. And so I found more success talking to them about units than I have about dollars because it seems very real to them, even if they haven't thought about it before, even if they were blissfully unaware that they were using 10,000 EC2 hours last month. Once I show them, okay, it was 10,000 last month, it was 8,000 the month before, it was 6,000 the month before, then they can start to say, oh yeah, that's because we've been going like this in our own stats. And then normally, at least the SRE, but then usually the technical delivery manager, the engineering manager in charge of the team, is keenly aware of resources and sort of how that correlates. Yep.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much, Matt. That was an amazing presentation. The next breakout starts in 10 minutes at 3:10. Matt, thank you so much. Big round of applause for Matt, please.
JR here from the FinOps Foundation. Thank you for watching. Please go to finops.org if you want to get plugged into this amazing community. And of course, hit subscribe right here on YouTube to get all the future content. Hope to see you soon.